Due to technical difficulties, this week's episode will be a little different from normal. Please enjoy.
Hey kids, welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I am your host, Dr. Michael Lennox, usually here with producer Zoe, who I know you all know and love, and as you probably heard from their announcement today, we had some technical problems this past week, and so I'm recording this sort of by myself, so we won't have the delicious interaction that we sometimes have between me and Zoe, which I miss, but we needed to push past the technical challenges and get you this week's astrology, which starts out with a conversation about release. What does it mean to release wounds from below the surface of consciousness in order to have a more expanded experience of your integration, wholeness, and embodiment? I'm talking about this today because we're coming out of a pretty deep and intense full moon designed to foster deep emotional releases, as every full moon does. But in the Virgo Pisces trajectory, we're really in a healing modality because the sun is in the Virgo mansion ruled by Chiron. So anything and everything that Chiron might be doing right now is highlighted because our conscious awareness is moving through the mansion that Chiron rules. And so everything we are aware of right now connects with the healing process. So besides just the general sense of every full moon being a release opportunity, and the Pisces full moon in particular being a healing kind of lunation due to Chiron's rulership, we also got treated as we were moving into this past weekend's full moon, a couple of great eliminator angles that set us up to have an even deeper emotional release and a healing experience of dropping old wounded patterns as we've been moving through this past weekend's full moon and the rest of the lunar cycle ahead. We got treated last week to a couple of great eliminator angles, most notably one between the sun and Chiron himself. About 3 or 4 days before last week's full moon, the Virgo sun, ruled in part by Chiron, had a conversation with Chiron from across the cosmos in that 150-degree angle known as the Great Eliminator. So that as we moved through this past weekend's lunation, we were already set up to be in a kind of chironic experience of digging below the surface of consciousness, marinating in some of the old wounded patterns that have been rising up, ready to get healed. And then moving through this past weekend was an energetic opportunity to have the unconscious mind release some of the old, outmoded emotional patterns that are ready to be let go of at this time. But I wanted to bring to your attention something a little bit bigger in terms of its wave of energy that's been going on for the last, say, month or so that amplifies this ability to move through this year and let go of old emotional patterns at both a collective level and an individual level because of a background transit that hit a few times over the last few weeks that will come back again in the fall and the early winter. And I want to describe that to you guys now. So Chiron in Aries burns off old wounds, if you will. The fire cardinal sign that Aries is, sort of assertive energy, combustible in its nature. So we've got the healer in this fiery archetype that I think is phenomenal for instantaneous deep healing experiences. It's like if healing healing an old wound, dropping an old wound could be sort of akin to the image of taking that wound structure out of your psyche in a kind of a mental, intellectual way. In other words, we have to understand the pattern before we can heal and release it. And then sort of putting it a little bit outside of ourselves and dousing it with some gasoline and lighting it on fire with a match. That's Chiron in Aries. Our healing experiences are pretty combustible with the healer moving through this fiery sign. And over the last, say, 4 or 5 weeks, Chiron has been staring down at the south node of the moon in Scorpio in the Great Eliminator angle. My favorite angle in astrology is this 150-degree fork in the road energy. It's a minor geometry in astrology, but it's my favorite because growth happens in little incremental shifts. We do a little work, explore a little shadow, we go through a few processes, we allow some uncomfortable feelings to rise up while we work with them in the conscious ways that you know how to do by now. And then Chiron and South Node in the Great Eliminator angle helps us let go of some of those old patterns. You know, the South Node is collective because the nodes are a collective point. The fact that the South Node is in Scorpio for this year and a half, starting, January of this year and middle of next year, that cycle will be over. But for the time being, the South Node in Scorpio means death and rebirth is possible with regard to the past. We really can transmute and transform old stuff while the South Node is moving through Scorpio this 18-month period that we're about halfway through. Chiron himself is very personal. He reflects our birth wound and then the wounds of our early childhood. So the way I work with Chiron isn't about ancestral wound or intergenerational wound. It's about you in your body being wounded by birth and then receiving the imprint of the ancestral trauma that comes from your parents and your parenting or the caretaker, the primary caretaker in those early years, right? So Chiron and then his transits throughout a life is reflecting our individual journey of healing your own personal wounds. The South Node in Scorpio is about your personal wounds because we're all in the same world with the same South Node moving through Scorpio, helping us drop into the deep places and experience a little death and rebirth in our wounded consciousness. But when you put a personal wounding planet like Chiron in connection with a collective wounding point like the South Node, then you're healing at every level, both the personal wounds that you have inside your own skin and then the wounds that get revealed as we try to move about in a world that has gone out of its mind with pain and suffering. And so we have sort of a double duty these days as human beings to not only heal our personal wounds, but to find some ability to heal some of the wounds in the collective. And if you've been following me for any period of time, you know that I believe that those things go hand in hand. That as we heal our personal wounds, we impact the wounds of the collective. And this transit of Chiron in conjuncting the South Node of the moon is all about that. Now, in some ways, this is a retrospect teaching, right? I'm talking about an energy that is essentially behind us, though only for about 30 seconds, right? The full moon was the culmination of all of this release potentiality. But in the last 4 or 5 weeks, as this full moon certainly was brewing in this lunar cycle, Chiron has hit this in conjunct with the South Node a couple of times. The dates are not important. These are not going to be precise enough to be like, oh, look what happened on, August 24th. But just understand that this deep and powerful, helpful mechanism for allowing us to dive into deeper unconscious spaces and do some shadow work that helps us release old wounds, is coming back. That's why I'm presenting all of this to you now, so that you have a mental note of the idea that in late October and then again in late December, this Chiron South node in conjunct is going to return 2 more times. So it's not a bad idea to make note of what this period of time is allowing you to release at the personal level, because there's a good chance that in the fall and in the early winter, some of the themes of the emotional releases of this lunar cycle are gonna come back. So the more we're sort of aware of how current cycles impact future cycles, the more we're like really cooking with gas with what astrology has to offer. And of course, when we get into late October and late December, I will certainly be reminding you in those podcasts about the full moon in Pisces and the powerful emotional releases that we're all going through now. So, speaking of healing, I want you guys to be very well aware of a kind of Venus explosion that happens essentially Friday of this week. Venus is in Virgo, Chiron's ruling sign, Mercury's as well, but of course we're paying most attention to the Chironic connection. So that starts what I'm about to sort of share with you about this upcoming, like weekend of shift, starts with the notion that the planet that rules how we give and receive love is very receptive to making shifts and changes that come from healing perspectives. In fact, that's something that Virgo as an archetype is really, really good at, is like taking things apart and putting them back together again, only better. My dad was a watchmaker, and it was fascinating to watch him take apart these tiny little mechanisms and clean all the little pieces off, find the part that was broken or not working, and then put it all back together. That's sort of what Venus and Virgo can do for our love mechanism, our intimacy experience, and also our relationship to our finances, because Venus rules finances. But we really are still in an incredible opportunity to do some healing on a personal level about how we give and receive love, even though the big full moon is behind us. And this is because of what Venus is going to do on Friday from her perch in Virgo, the healing archetype. First of all, Venus herself is going to in conjunct Chiron. So that's a profound, psychic surgery where the heart center in all of us is going to work with the inner healer in all of us. And the conversation they're having in the great eliminator between Venus and Chiron is, what can we let go of? What can we release at a deep and emotional level that will open your heart to a greater level, or a greater amount of openness? Or like my standard language is, become a better giver and receiver of love. Because Venus is also trining the north node of the moon on Friday, that does mean that whatever healing work we're up to right now is going to directly funnel into our sense of movement forward. Our movement towards our life purpose is increased as we let go of the old patterns that would weigh us down. And that's one of the gorgeous sort of addendums to Chiron and Venus creating the exit strategy. Venus trining the north node says, and you'll be able to move forward more powerfully as a result of the healing work you're allowing yourself to go through at this time. Venus will square Mars on Friday. That puts the kind of conflict energy into the mix that you kind of need when you want to shake things up and sort of look below the hood to see how things are running. And Mars is in his station. Mars is going to be going retrograde. And this is not a triple transit of Mars's cycle, because Venus will shoot off ahead. But it is interesting to me, at a moment when the heart is going through a deeper level of healing, This square between Venus and Mars over the weekend is going to be friction oriented and bring up some conflict. But through whatever conflict that might arise, especially on Friday, there might be a beautiful healing opportunity. And the backdrop of the Sun and Neptune in an opposition is a confusing little passage where only faith will carry you through. Sun opposing Neptune is like turning on the fog machine of cloudiness and confusion designed to let you move through the world with, faith in things unseen. So, a lot of traffic as we move through like Thursday, Friday, especially, and Saturday. Look for deeper experiences of healing, releasing, and reorienting how you align your heart to be a giver and receiver of love. So Mercury has turned around and is now moving backwards. He did that over the weekend, actually right with the full moon. And in fact, he's still in what's called his station, and that kind of changes tomorrow. So what I'm talking about is any retrograding planet really does appear to stop moving in the sky. And so a few days before Mercury turned around, he landed at 8 degrees of Libra. He turned around at 8 degrees of Libra, and then he stayed there because he doesn't appear to be moving in the sky. So Mercury roughly travels like a degree a day, not quite, but close enough to be able to make the point that Mercury staying at the same degree point for like 7 or 8 days in a row while he's turning around is very cranky for communication. So the fact that he hits 7 degrees of Libra tomorrow means that we are, yes, he's backwards. That's discombobulating. We are going to be bumping into the furniture a lot. But at least he's moving a little bit faster by virtue of leaving that station of 8 degrees and starting to get communication moving again. Although, remember, he's backwards. We're going to be, hitting all the Mercury retrograde shenanigans as we go. So just as a quick reminder of the broad strokes of every Mercury retrograde cycle, in case you didn't do this yet, you can glance back to the period of time between August 20th and September 9th. That was Mercury in his retrograde shadow, meaning covering territory he's going to come back to again. So that's just a little reminder to glance back in case you need some help navigating these dicey, bumpy couple of weeks. Of course, once he goes direct on October 2nd, we've got, 2.5 weeks of him wrapping stuff up in the third act. So we're in the second act, the middle act, the juicy, filling to the sandwich, right? If the shadow periods are like the bread, we're in the filling and we're in the meat. So we do have an important and challenging Mercury retrograde moment coming up this Sunday. It's going to impact Saturday, Sunday, and Monday with a peak on Sunday. There are 2 transits for Mercury that hit on Sunday that also hit on September 1st and 2nd. So this is how that works, right? I'm going to describe to you the energies that are coming up that are potentially difficult that are going to hit on Sunday. And your job is to look back to September 1st and 2nd. I use my calendar for these explorations. If you're a journaler, even better. Look back to September 1st and 2nd to have some assistance with understanding what this weekend, especially Sunday, is likely to bring you. Only it's going to be more challenging because the planet of communication is fully backward in his motion, but there might be hints from about, 2 weeks ago. So here are the transits. Mercury is going to oppose Jupiter and sesquisquare Saturn. That's interesting because they're both the social planets. Saturn and Jupiter reflect life on Earth itself, right? So the personal planets are like skin in, or maybe the walls of your home and in, right? Because your home and your body are the same thing energetically. The outer planets are your 5-dimensional consciousness, but Saturn and Jupiter rule everything from your front door to the edges of your sense of Earth as a planet that we live on. So what that means is these particular transits are very much about experiences we have outside of our skin and our home, trying to communicate powerfully with others out in the world, right? So the opposition from Mercury to Jupiter in and of itself isn't a terrible transit. One reason I say that is there's this trope in astrology that says, well, there is no such thing as Jupiter transits. No Jupiter transit can be that bad. But there's certainly a negative, shadowy artifact to Jupiter, which is over the topness, bigger than it merits, out of proportion responses, too much opinion, either coming from you or coming at you. So you've got this overblown transit that, while it could be joyful in and of itself, is still an overblown communicative transit, while at the same time, Mercury in the agitation, the 135-degree sesquisquare, with the planet that brings lessons, breakdowns, delays, and problems so that we might learn a lesson or two, is going to combine with the opposition to Jupiter in a sort of a clusterfuck of outsized reactions, lack of proportionality between stimulus and response. You get the point. So look back to September 1st and 2nd and do your best to see what was going on in your communication story back then, because you can be assured that as we move through this weekend ahead, if there were any themes that you can spot in those early days of September, they're gonna come back, or they're likely to come back and need some more attention. Now, of course, we're not done with this outsized, overblown, reactionary, frustration-y kind of communication kerfuffle, because we're going to meet these two transits again in Mercury's third act direct retrograde wrap-up between October 9th and October 11th. Challenges you move through this weekend may have hints about them on September 1st and 2nd. And if you move through whatever communication processes brings you this coming weekend and find that it's frustrating and challenging and, didn't resolve something, trust me, you'll have another opportunity to patch things up that did break down this weekend when we get into that second week of October. I think this is going to be a pretty bumpy Mercury retrograde process. So, do your best to move slowly and mindfully enough to not bump into too much of the furniture, and just, move slow as you go. Have at it, everybody.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. All right, we have an email in dream from Geraldine, and this says, I was in someone's apartment where we were taking care of several children. A girl about 5 years old walked down the hallways and simply disappeared. As we searched for her, we realized nobody had come in and she couldn't have left. Suddenly, she was walking again down the hall as if appearing out of thin air. She explained she was building a home in the space between the molecules, which is where space is empty. She demonstrated walking in and out of the plane between observable worlds. She had me hold out my hand and close my eyes, and I could feel the outline of her little house. She said others on the other side help her with more complex details, such as doors and windows, and finishing, because after all, she was only 5 years old and didn't know everything about architecture. When I opened my eyes, there was nothing to see or feel. We were relieved she was safe, and her story somehow seemed possible in a fourth dimension, but there was concern about her disappearing. I didn't know what to make of this dream, but the space between molecules seemed very logical, like knowing a truth upon waking. All the best, Geraldine.
Well, Geraldine is not kidding that she, like a truth upon waking. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I want to start by talking about a dream that kind of got me kicked off into dream interpretation land. Is a dream that I had as about a 3-year old that definitely recurred enough times and was powerful enough that it was like a core imprinting on me. And I never forgot this dream. And it as I grew in age and wisdom, it was this dream that kind of kept bringing me back to a like a truth upon waking experience that while I had it at 3 years and 3 and 4 years old, I couldn't know the truth I was dipping into then. But well, here's the dream. I was in a kind of space, like an abstract open space, not like a location or anything, but just space. And simultaneously, I had the sense that above me, there was enormity, and like below me, there was a sense of minuscule nature. But I'm not talking about like being in front of a tall building and a little bench. I'm talking about space itself. It was a terrifying feeling. Like this was a terrifying dream. This did not feel good to have because that sort of void emptiness that the dream felt like, it was like something that could swallow me up. But it was very distinct, this sense of enormity and minuscule tininess. Then when I sort of grew up and started learning about life and learned about molecules and had the first taste of what happens when a young person who's thinking in a certain way notices that the model of the solar system and the model of molecules seem to look a lot alike. And then later on in life, in the world of science, we would learn that, oh, wow, we're actually all connected a molecular level, that there's more space in between the little parts that make up molecules than there are actually pieces of mass. And that through that idea, that there is no actual disconnection between us and everything else, right? So this captivated my imagination as well. And this is not uncommon for people to like, whoa, doesn't that blow your mind that we're not actually ever touching, though it feels like we are? So as I began to learn these things about life and still perceive this dream, there was a certain point where I got it, like ding, ding, ding. This is a dream about infinite nature. That we are, in fact, replicating larger and smaller experiences in a pattern sort of way, like the solar system looks like a molecule, that there's more space in space than there is matter in space. There's more space at the molecular level than there is matter at the molecular level. And somehow this notion, if we can live knowing this in some fundamental way, I think life is more graceful and easy. This is what it is than to have a spiritual practice, to have some activities, behaviors that you do that calm and quiet the mind where separation begins and ends and allow the felt sensation of this emptiness, this connectedness, this the fact that there's really only one thing going on here. And there's a 5-year-old aspect of character inside Geraldine who knows this. She's going to hold out her hand and take your hand and help you feel this. So let's start with, you're in someone's apartment when you're taking care of several children. So apartments are homes or senses of self. Even if it's not your apartment, you're somewhere else. The dream is a consideration of who are you right now and how's it going that you have care to give. Taking care of several children. Taking care of several children at the top of how you describe this dream certainly says we're in a dream that's about how you are caring for yourself. Then there's this aspect of character that shows up, this guide, this 5-year-old girl. And she's your access to helping understand this truth, the space between the molecules where we are in perceived emptiness. That's where we're held by the divine. That's how flow works. We get more interested in the empty space than the pieces of matter. And then through that, we lean into life unfolding on life's terms, things arising as they do and perceiving them as in the flow as opposed to, I wish that weren't happening, right? The more we lean into the space, the more graceful life is. And she is the part of you that knows that. And in fact, even your language, Geraldine, of saying this idea seems possible when you consider multidimensional consciousness, that it's possible in a fourth dimension, but like you have a concern about her disappearing. Well, of course she's going to disappear. She's a part of you that moves in and out of 3-dimensional and 4-dimensional space. She's a part of you that understands not only multidimensionality, but that we are all connected and one. So this is a profound initiation dream from my perspective. And here's something I'd like you to think about, Geraldine. 5-year-old girl. There's a couple of ways that I want to perceive this or reflect this for you to think about. One is this may connect to energies that you marinated in when you were 5 years old. You may have had dream experiences like I did as a 3, 4, and 5-year-old that maybe are no longer remembered, but there's something about your life at around that age that woke up or opened you up to a perspective of living that turned into your spiritual path as a grown-up. Another way to think about a 5-year-old in a dream is consciousness that has arisen in the last 5 years. Think about your spiritual path and where you were at 5 years ago. Did you find, or have you, when you think about it or glance back, do you notice that perhaps there was a kind of an uplift in your spiritual perspective in the last 5 years? And another thought about this figure in the dream, which is a little bit more in the world of like woo-woo, which I'm all about, but I don't speak about it quite the same way because I have my half scientist has to keep me somewhat grounded in things that are provable. But certainly we all have guides. Many of these guides, for those people who are gifted at interpreting guide-like energy, which I am not, but those who are can sometimes describe guides as beings in your soul group that sometimes incarnate into bodies, sometimes don't. This life, you're in a body and you have part of your soul group shows up as guides. And there just may be a young feminine energy as a guide within your soul group who is showing up in this dream state to give you a little bit of a reveal behind the curtain of just how connected we are, just how much we are in the flow, and just how important it is to know that on some level so that as we're bumping into the furniture like crazy in our 3-dimensional experience, there's a part of us that understands that we're being carried by a greater experience that's multidimensional in which flow and connectedness is all there is.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.